on your right, you'll see a lot of the plastic greenhouses. One terrific thing that rather surprised me is that in the middle of winter, we have fresh strawberries here and a lot of good fresh produce. From what I understand, these are put on top of the rice paddies at the end of the rice season, and they're kept warm with generators or even just the solar heat, and a lot of the vegetables and, like I said earlier, strawberries are grown in here. And then approximately May 1st, they're taken down and then rice is planted. And then when you come up here in the springtime, in summer, you'll see all of this as a very pale green with where the rice is growing. 1/6 of all the cultivated land in Korea is used for growing rice, and that still isn't enough rice to feed the population. There's still much rice brought in from China. And if you would visit a Korean family, you'll realize they have rice 3 times a day, and so that would explain why they cannot grow enough to feed the entire family year-round. And at the mouth of it, it's very close to the North Korean border, so they don't use, they don't do a lot of shipping into the Han River, in fact, none at all. But supposedly there are also bombs in underneath the water because North Korean frogmen, scuba divers, etc., could possibly come down very quietly. So the river has a lot of spotlights at nighttime, and it's always watched. And the barbed wire goes almost in, you saw back there where it began, so that you don't do anything that might jeopardize us. At the same time, it's safe because the Republic of Korea and the American United Nations soldiers are on guard at all times when there are tour groups up there. Incidentally, even though that area is guarded by the United Nations, the American soldiers are the only ones who are very active in assisting. The Swiss and the Swedes have a building there. They might have 3 or 4 guys there at any one time, but on the whole, the United Nations has turned it over to the American soldiers to do the work, along with the Republic of Korea soldiers. Less populated areas, and on a clear day off to your right is Ilsan, and coming back I hope you can see the tall apartments. It's called a satellite city. Ilsan is new town. I don't know what the population is now, but a lot of high-rise apartments. But because the air is cleaner outside of the city, you're finding these small satellite towns becoming more and more popular. In fact, in this morning's Korea Herald, they mentioned that for the 6th year in a row, the population of Seoul has decreased. It's down now to 10.3 million, and it had been over 11 million at one point, so it's losing a few 100,000 each year. And I've often wondered, since I'm American and I come across a number of American families, how many Americans are here, and by chance they answer citizens, not military, living in Seoul. I would have not thought it was that many, but then when you think my husband figured it out, Chinese, Japanese, and in German. And then after that, then you'll see various other groups. If you have an opportunity to travel around, you'll see 05 and fought for 5 years, and finally in 1910 they annexed Korea as part of the Japanese country, and it stayed that way until after the World War II in 1945 when Korea got its independence back. While the Japanese were here, they were very rude, mean to the Korean people. Many thousands of them were sent to Japan to work. The Korean people who were here were forced to take Japanese names. So if you would happen to talk to a Korean person who was born before 1940 or older, they would have a Japanese name, which they may or may not have forgotten. Sometimes they don't even want to bring that part of their history up. 1945, after the end of World War II, Korea, it was decided, would be divided so that they could have some of the stronger nations watch over them as they redeveloped. So the 38th parallel, which is a few miles north of Seoul, was decided to be the artificial border. It was not turned into two countries, but just divided temporarily, they decided. The north part was to be watched over by Russia and China, and the south part was to be watched over by the United States. By 1948, the United States decided to encourage and give permission to the South Korean group to get their own government restarted, and elections were held. North Korea did not choose to do that, and during the next few years there was a lot of jealousy as North Korea watched South Korea blossom and become a very strong country. So that kind of started to set the precedent, or set the setting for the Korean War. And without warning at all, June 25th, 1951, on a Sunday morning, the word came that some of the towns north of Seoul were being invaded, and for the next 3 years, the North Koreans, with help from the Chinese, kept pouring in and pushing down and into almost the area of Busan, which is quite a few hundred miles south of here. And it was back and forth. The Americans came in and helped. This is where Douglas MacArthur in early 1953, I believe it was, came into Incheon and helped. 51. I don't know my history. My teachers stopped at the end of World War II. It tells you how old I am. 1951, General MacArthur and the Americans came into Incheon without any warning, was able to push a lot of the North Koreans back, and then the North Koreans then yelled to China to help. So anyway, finally, 1953, they decided to call a truce, a ceasefire, because it's never been called a treaty, an end of the war, or anything else. So in actuality, since 1953, there's been no true peace between the two countries. You'll get a lot more of this information with correct dates from the guy up there. 3 years, and most of the temples and palaces that you might visit while you're visiting here that look very old have virtually all been rebuilt. We did hear an interesting story on an OB beer factory tour the other week, that the beer factory down south of here was purposefully not bombed. When the Americans were trying to get rid of the North Koreans that had worked their way down that far, they could recognize the beer factory and bombed all around it, but they left that there so that they would have beer when the war was over. It seemed to have worked because OB, which is Oriental Brewery, is still very much in business.
You just have to have your priorities.
His father did, and it's a very closed country. We didn't know all that much about it. And they always seem to be flexing their muscles so some word gets out about things, and you probably have read a lot of that while you're here or from where you're from. So it kind of keeps us all on our toes, the Americans and the Korean Army. Median strip in the middle of grass. They hope that, they use the word when the two Koreas are combined, this road will be the main northwest route, so that they'll be able to make the road a much wider road. For now, it's just 2 lanes in each direction. From there, you can use telescopes and see right into North Korea. A lot of the families who are living here in South Korea had come down into South Korea during the war or before it, so they still consider North Korea their homeland. And during the holiday that's coming up, Lunar New Year, and also Chuseok, which is in the fall, it's very much a tradition of the South Korean people to visit their homelands and their ancestors. So many of the people from North Korea come up to the observatory here, and also to a little area up here further called Injak, and they bow to their ancestors who are living in North Korea. They might give food sacrifices and perhaps bouquets of flowers. So there will probably be crowds of people up here next week for that reason. But as of now, there's no kind of telephone service, newspaper, or mailing, or any kind of service between the two Koreas. Electronic looking billboards. These are some of the propaganda signs that the South Koreans send over to North Korea, because across the river with binoculars, the North Koreans can read that. I think the wording changes, and I don't know what this one says, but sometimes they say, "We have plenty of food, happiness is in front of you," and then one of the newer ones says, "We have 1 million cars." That one says the land of opportunity. Excuse me, I made a mistake. My Korean friend here says we have 10 million cars. That's to let the North Koreans know that we are very prosperous here. The actual border, when the ceasefire was called in 1953, the South Koreans had actually gone a little bit north of the 38th parallel. So if you look on a map that shows the border, it's rather irregular, and that's because that's where the fighting was. The day they decided to have a ceasefire, and the agreement was that 2 kilometers on each side of that actual border, which turns out to be 4 kilometers wide, which is a little bit over 2 miles, 2¼ miles wide. The full length of the peninsula is considered a no man's land, and it's watched over on our side by the United Nations, like I had mentioned. It's become pretty much of a wildlife sanctuary. You'll see perhaps a lot of birds or some small animals in there, and it's supposed to be very, very peaceful. Oh, anyway, within that area on the south side is a small town, Kaesanga. There's 271 people living in there, and the people who were living there had to have owned property within that area before the war started, and then they chose after the war to stay in that area and were willing to follow a lot of very stringent rules. Otherwise, they had to give up their land and move somewhere else. The rules are now that they have to be in their homes by 10 o'clock at night, the lights out I think by 11 o'clock at night. They have guards in that area whenever they're outside. If one of their sons marries someone from outside the village, that person may move into the village, but if a daughter marries someone outside the village, she has to leave. They have to live within the town, I think it's 260 some days per year in order to get tax benefits. They get subsidized by the government, and because they don't have to pay taxes because it legally is not considered part of South Korea, they average approximately $80,000 a year salary, which is more than half, or more than twice as much as people down in South Korea, perhaps even much more. They're allowed 17 acres of land, I believe, per person, whereas other areas, they don't have that much land at all. The rice and crops that grow in that area, because it's pollution-free, command higher prices. So if they bring their Parmesan rice down and sell it in Korea, it gets far better prices. So they haven't, if they're willing to follow all the rules, they haven't made.
Come and go freely.
Evolved. Originally, and still now, they say that we're not allowed to wear blue jeans because the North Koreans will be there with binoculars and they tend to think the blue jeans are for poor people. So therefore, if they see a lot of us wearing blue jeans, they'll tell all other people, see, here's pictures of Westerners, they're poor, they're wearing blue jeans. They used to think the same thing about sneakers, Nikes, etc., until they found out how much sneakers cost in America and in Europe, and now it's kind of a status thing. So the USO and the Joint Services, the United Nations, has no problem at all with people wearing sneakers up here, but the blue jeans they still don't allow. I kind of question sometimes the thinking, but neither here nor there to question too strongly. But you will see North Koreans in their building right over the border. The little building that we will be going into, they can see us. And you'll have an opportunity to step over this little tiny line and be truly in North Korea. So occasionally we'll have the North Korean soldiers come down and peer in the window at us. If that happens, it's another silly rule. You are allowed to take pictures of them, but you can't wave to them. You can't kind of make eye contact. You can't acknowledge that you see them, but for some reason they say, yeah, you may take a picture. Okay, here is the beginning of the Freda Bridge. At this point, you cannot...
The guards downstairs because private wall was swinging downstairs. I like this. These are not the original buildings. You can consider original.
He's right, to our left, there's a window. On a clear day, you can see a better. He's watching our footage.
Well, summertime, I have a big building.
Yeah, he's right there in the window right next to the main guard who's standing there. There's two little windows to go.
They focus themselves along with the school programs here. They're the security force towers, the only thing we guard. Sometimes the JDO building is pretty much about 20 hours a day is guarded, and then we have these cameras, so we don't need a roving guard or a rotating guard out here. Kind of makes it a little more convenient for us.
Soldados surcoreanos miran hacia el norte. Al momento entramos al edificio, soldados surcoreanos en pose. Mesa de negociaciones dentro del edificio. Soldados surcoreanos frente a bandera de las Naciones Unidas.
Although there is one on record as lasting 11 and a half hours, all statements are translated into 3 languages, English, Korean, and Chinese.
Aquí posando con un soldado surcoreano frente a la mesa de negociaciones.
This is done so by translators working simultaneously in the glass booths at either end of the building. The microphones to my front are monitored and recorded 24 hours a day. Therefore, anything said in this building can be heard by the North Koreans. The microphone cord you see running down the center of this table actually denote the military demarcation line within this building. Therefore, those of you standing on my left are now in communist North Korea, while those of you on my right are still relatively safe in the Republic. If you would like to make a crossing into North Korea, you may do so in this building. However, I would ask that you do so at that end of the table in respect to the United Nations flag. You'll also notice there are guards posted in this building. They are here for your protection and are standing at a modified position of Taekwondo, which we call Rock Ready. This is to present a more intimidating stance toward the North Koreans, as are the sunglasses. You also notice the rock soldiers posted outside the building are standing half exposed and half unexposed. This to create less of a target if someone was to fire upon them. Please do not disrupt their duties in any way. You'll have a few moments in here to take pictures.
En la puerta que da a terrenos Corea del Norte, con un soldado montando guardia frente a la puerta. Aquí regresando al edificio principal.
on our way home.
It's a nice place.
Teddy White Lily is good. All that silhouetted hill down the small saddler dip, really difficult to make out. There's small black box there. That's actually a 3-story high North Korean speaker system, which usually broadcasts propaganda about 6 to 12 hours a day, but they're not playing it at this time. You come just in from there, it's a little hard to make out, but there's just the first brush line coming in from the hill. You can see a small propaganda sign. You can see it. There's another one there, and that one states self-reliance is our way of life. Moving on to the left, you see North Korean 2-story guard tower. Once again, you are under close observation at this time. Moving further to your left, off in the distance, if you look behind, you see that small clump of large trees. You see the 2 that are off to the side. Directly behind those small 2 trees, there's a small cluster of white buildings. That's the location of the former Czechoslovakian and Polish information camp. The large white building just to the front of that is with the pine trees on either side. That's the location of the North Korean People's Peace Museum. It's ironically called that for this is where the 2 axes used in the 1976 Axmore incident are housed. About 50 meters to your right, you can see 1, possibly 2 of the MDL or border signs. The military demarcation line itself follows the tree line down, makes an abrupt 90-degree turn to the left, down there at the corner of the tree line, bisecting the Station River and the Bridge of No Return down to the Han River estuary in the west. That is the Bridge of No Return you see to your right front. It was far North Korean Guard Tower, excuse me, your left front. The far North Korean Guard post is still manned 24 hours a day. Our checkpoint 4 on our side is no longer manned. For anything you can see down there, you can also see up here at checkpoint 3. The circular grass area to the front of the blue guard shack was the focal point for the Axmore incident. If you look on the right side of the road, starting from the bridge and moving up, if you count 5 trees, between the 4th and 5th tree, kind of near the pavement side, you can see a small concrete encasement. That's actually the monument for the Axmore incident where the tree once stood. Just beyond checkpoint 4, if you go over the river, you see another North Korean propaganda sign. That one states follow the path of the leading star, reference to Kim Il-sung dying and his son Kim Jong-il taking his place in July of 1994. You can see the hazy silhouette of Gijongdong off in the distance. You really can't see the flag flying very well today. That's not surprising. It does weigh about 600 pounds dry. They did take it down during inclement weather, for it will tear under its own weight. This pretty much concludes my briefing for checkpoint 3. There's really not that many pictures to take because of the haze, but feel free to take pictures throughout the area. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.
This picture of the bridge of no return.
Left front edge of the bridge, you will see another one of these yellow panel markers which run coast to coast. I remind you, this is the only thing that denotes the border between the north and the south. Photography is once again a quick, please do not take